Migrating to Australia, it's a podcast where I speak to Australia's friendliest, funniest migration agent. I'm Grant Williams. That other voice you just heard is David Bongiorno.
Lawyer, it's a criminal offence to be a migration agent. Lawyer, immigration lawyer.
They had us learning the terminology for all these years, and then they've made it totally redundant.
March 22. No more. Agent, no more, but immigration lawyer since 2006. But Grant, we've got a lovely Italian guest because we haven't had many Italians on the show before, only 2 in 2 years. Dr. Corinna Galliano is the third Italian to appear on the Migrating to Australia podcast. She has a doctorate in management from the University of Sydney Business School. She's a qualified engineer and a qualified TM, meditation teacher. Corinna, welcome.
She's our first Swiss Army knife guest, David.
She's got more talents than you and I put together, triple, quadruple. She's a very interesting woman, and we want to talk about her experience coming to Australia, getting a doctorate from the University of Sydney Business School, very prestigious school, and spreading the word of meditation. Corinna, welcome.
Good afternoon, David and Grant. It's a pleasure to be here with the two of you.
Undergraduate holders, you're Dr. Galliano. You have a doctorate in business management.
Yes, I do have a doctorate in business management. It sounds like a fancy word, but what basically you do when you have a doctorate is that you keep doing some research hopefully in companies by looking at how people make things happen, how people realize strategy, how people strategize. And then you write papers, which is a quite boring process because you need to send these papers to committees and need to do a blind peer review, and it goes through several cycles. And then when everyone is happy with it, it gets published. So it's a very long process from when you're observing the workplace to when a paper gets published.
Is English your second or third language?
English.
Is English your
second language?
So you've done a 100,000 word thesis in English?
Yeah.
What was the topic of your thesis?
The topic of my thesis was paradox and how leaders can manage paradoxical tension in workplace, in making decisions. And so we live in increasingly complex environment, increasingly complex context, as COVID has made us realize. It was always like that, but COVID brought everything to the surface. And so a leader of a company has to continuously trade off between opposites, whether he wants the company to exploit what the company already has, or whether the company wants to explore new opportunities. And so paradox theory is a theory that looks at how a leader can do both things simultaneously. And exploration and exploitation is called the innovation paradox, and is one of the many paradoxes that are existent in organization, because we all live in a dual reality. And so we learn, especially in Western society, we learn to think in terms of duality. So we always polarize things. But if we try to take an Eastern approach to reality, then we are able to hold opposites. When we are able to do so, we are able also to harness greater energy. And so leaders, but not only leaders, all level of an organization, leaders, middle management, executives, frontline people, if you teach people how to adopt what we might call a paradoxical mindset, now we are able to navigate complexity, we are able to navigate uncertainty, we are able to navigate change, but simultaneously create a sense of stability around us.
David, I don't know about you, but whenever I hear an academic conversation that involves perceptions of realities, I just think of Timothy Leary or chemical research. Because the perceptions of reality are very hard things to define. Because I think when you mention that term, everybody has a different idea of what it is. So, Corinna, how do you tie that down in your field?
So the way you do it is you immerse yourself into an organization. So you spend time with the organization, you conduct serial interviews with people, and you probe them with questions And then you take all the material that it consists of interview script, consists of meeting script, and then you go through this material and you code word by word. So it's a very tedious and long process. And from that, you let your theory to emerge from the data. Now, as a researcher, when I entered the field, I had already an idea of what I wanted to research. I wanted to research how people manage complexity. And paradox was a useful theory for me to look at reality. So I look at the reality of that organization through the lens of paradox theory. And then you let just things to emerge from the data. And if, Grant, you did the same research I did, you probably are going to come up with a different theory. You're probably going to theorize differently results from the way I did, because you have a different, as you mentioned, way of looking at reality that is informed by your experiences, is informed by your interest, is informed by what you have learned. So what I've seen in the data is going to be very different from what you're going to see in the data. And that's the beauty of qualitative research. So I'm a qualitative researcher because it helps us to get a picture of the richness of reality, and then help that, using that to inform how we can improve life within an organization.
So does that mean that, sorry, David, I just want to extend that just a little bit because I can't resist. Does that mean we all have a different reality? We're all in a different reality?
Grant, you're touching an extremely valid point. So,
that would be almost the first time.
As David mentioned, I'm a Vedic meditation teacher. And according to the Vedic tradition, there are as many realities as state of consciousness. And so everyone is going to have a different truth depending on their state of consciousness. So let's say I am on the street and I witness an accident, and there are another 15 people are going to witness that same accident. Now, I'm going to have a version of it. And there are going to be some elements that we are going to all share. We're going to maybe share there was a car that hit another car, and we might agree on the color of the car and how many people were involved. But then I might interpret the scene in a very different way. And so each of us is going to have a very different interpretation of what happened. And so reality is a different state of consciousness. And that is one of the principle of the Vedic worldview. And that's why I've learned to meditate. And that's why I've decided to become a Vedic meditation teacher. Because the more you're conscious, the more you're going to do better decisions. The more you're going to have appreciation of finer and subtler aspect of reality. And when you do that, now you are going to make better decisions.
You look towards the east, Corinna. You were mentioning, what did you draw from the east and what could be applied here in the west? What could we learn from the east?
We can learn many things. So the West has been extremely successful in applying a very rational model, and the West came up with very valid system and things. So we have medicine that is able to produce a vaccine that hopefully is going to help us to come out of the COVID pandemic. So there are very valid things that we have in the West. However, the West hasn't taught us about the self, about the nature of the self. And so we have a lot of people that have a lot of money, they have a lot of knowledge, they have a lot of maybe fame, but they still don't know how to calm the mind. They still don't know how to find happiness. They think happiness is in this next success. And then when they get there, they're still not happy because your happiness is based on ignorance of something better that is out there. And so when you become aware that there is something better out there, now you're going to be unhappy. And so in the West, we have failed to teach about the self.
David, you did a very clever thing there about perception, because if we look at a map, of where we are and we look to where Vedic meditation evolved, we look to the West. We don't look to, but when we talk about it, we all understand what you're saying because it's about what East and West is.
It's getting very esoteric.
So, yeah.
Corinna, in terms of you must have interviewed dozens and dozens of hundreds of company directors at various levels from various countries. Where did your research travels take you in the East and the West?
So my research wasn't based on big numbers, was based on drilling down one specific company. But this specific company is a global company. So I traveled to London, I traveled to Texas, and I traveled to Sydney. So these were the three places where I've interviewed people and I've met people for the scope of my research.
Corinna, if part of doing a doctorate or a PhD study is you have to defend your research and your project. Now, having just heard what you said, if I was on your panel, I would have said, why didn't you go to an office in a country that has a different basis of culture? Because you didn't go to China or Singapore or Addis Ababa or anything. Is that something that perhaps you would think about doing to extend your thoughts about how a global company operates and what the sort of guiding fundamentals in the management strategy are?
Grant, you raise a really great point there.
David.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking, should I say 2-0? Well, I'd be mature and say nothing.
It would be a great opportunity to do so, but with qualitative research, what you need is great access into companies. So if it's a company based, let's say in China, you need the time, the resources, and the availability of management to spend time with the company. So, and it's always great to be immersed in the field. So now the nature of qualitative research might change with the COVID-19 because it's not anymore possible as before to be immersed in a office space and look at how people do things in their everyday work because everything has been shifting online. But we can now look how having shifted online is changing the dynamic of the way we work and the way we do things. So probably right now, the most relevant way of looking at the same research would be looking at how the shift from working full-time into an office to having moved people virtually has changed the dynamic of working together. But of course, that type of cross-cultural research is really a nice way of looking at things, but is more suitable for a quantitative study where you interview different people from different countries, you conduct maybe some surveys, and you take a more quantitative approach to your study, and then you compare and contrast results. And then you can appreciate differences in culture and what's their influence on a particular theory.
Corinna, how did the company take your paper when you finished? Did they read and give grateful thanks for your insight, or what was the feedback from the business you studied?
The benefit of my research were real time because people were getting great relief by my presence there. It was an environment under a lot of pressure. So everyone was under a lot of pressure, under a lot of change, because these are the elements that create more paradoxical tension in an environment, scarcity of resources, a lot of change. And therefore, people, by having me there, interviewing them, in the process of reflecting, me asking questions, were taking great benefit out of that. And then, because I was working very closely with the leaders of the company, they were gaining insight on a day-to-day basis. So there was then a showcase of the results, and they get an understanding of the process they were going through. But I must say, I think the greatest benefit that they got out of it was this day-to-day interaction, the interviews that I was conducting. People were really At the beginning, they were quite reticent to express themselves. And then over time, they didn't let me go. I was sitting there for an hour interview and they were still wanting to talk to me and disclose information with me.
The University of Sydney Business School, who owns the copyright in your thesis? The school, the business school, your supervisors, or you? Or is it shared? Who owns the copyright for your thesis?
That's more of a legal question. I surely own the copyright, but I'm not sure what is the rest of the people involved in. I don't think the supervisor owns any copyright on it, but I'm not sure what's the position of University of Sydney on that.
Is there a book that you could write from it in plain language for us mere mortals?
Yes.
So we might learn something. Are you going to write a book?
That's on my mind, but life is very busy, so we will see. But now it's on my mind.
You're a lecturer, researcher at the University of Sydney Business School,
yeah.
And you've gone through the Italian education system and the Australian education system. What are the benefits, or what are the strengths and weaknesses of both education systems at tertiary level?
The Italian system is a very old school system, at least when I was there, where there is the teacher gives you the information, but there is a very little practical application. While I can see how in Australia, everything is aimed to give people a practical application of what they are learning. And that's a huge difference, because people, I feel, in the Australian education system are much better integrated with the work environment. While when I did my engineering degree, I was living in a happy bubble. I love the intellectual stimulation of solving problems, but I had no connection at all with the work environment. And when I got out of there, for me, it was a shock. While I can see how much University of Sydney really attempts to connect students with the workplace, not only with the regular curricula, but also with other programs that they create to facilitate this connection. So I would say that's the main difference.
Sydney and Melbourne both have, Sydney University, Melbourne University, both have great business schools. What made you choose the Sydney University Business School?
It was a very easy choice. Melbourne University had a higher score for English language to enter the business school PhD program. So they wanted half higher score than Sydney University. And with the IELTS, which is the English test that you need to take to apply, the IELTS score that I got, I could apply to Sydney University, but not to Melbourne University Business School. And I think that's probably one of the reasons. And then I was based in Sydney when I did my application, and I sent an email to a lecturer from Sydney University, and I got a supervisor that was ready to sponsor me. So it was just a series of coincidences, and then I got a scholarship. They offered me a scholarship. So
brilliant. And what was that stipend? Was that stipend? And break it down for us, because academic work is rigorous, time-consuming. Were you appropriately remunerated by way of the scholarship, or was it still short?
It was still short. It was $2,500. But the good thing is that once you enter into university, very quickly you get opportunity to teach. And so that is always a good way to gain experience in the field and get extra money to top up your scholarship.
Now, I've got to ask, I know Grant's chomping at the bit to ask a question. I've got to ask, as you're a lecturer, as you're a teacher, a tutor, what are the general differences between Australian students and international students?
It's hard to answer, because when you are teaching undergraduate level, you will have more national students. When you're teaching postgraduate, you will have more international. Most of them are going to be international. So it's hard to compare on the same level. It's more a difference between undergraduate and postgraduate. I think it's hard to say. Of course, there is the language barrier when it comes to international students. And when it comes to national students, but it's very hard to compare, because it's really, when you teach undergraduate, you get Australian people. When you teach postgraduate, You get a lot of Chinese students, some Indians, and few Europeans. So I would say the undergraduate students are much more motivated. The postgraduate students, you can see a stronger motivation, much more involved. International students might be a bit less involved than undergraduate students, but it's difficult to answer.
And David, of course, you have recognised that you drew a false binary choice there in that you had Australian students versus international students, as if all internationals are the same. But they're obviously not. They come from very different backgrounds, different cultures.
What I've been studying my law degree as a mature age law student, albeit over 20 years ago, I found studying with Patronus scholars out of Malaysia, I found a greater hunger. International students overall had a greater hunger to succeed than local students because they have so much more at stake than local students. That's what I was getting at.
My experience would be that especially people coming from Europe, they come here, they are in holiday mode. Most of them, they come here maybe for 6 months, 1 year, just to get the experience, have some fun. No one is really seriously thinking to live forever in Australia. So especially European, it's more like holiday mode rather than be strongly motivated to succeed.
Sorry, of course, if David was in your class, Corinna, as a mature age student, he was sitting up the front asking all the questions, yeah?
I always sat up the front in my law lectures.
And all those first years and second years, Dave, who came straight out of school, are sitting up the back going, I wish that guy'd shut up.
But it's interesting because you've gone to Sydney Business School, you've gone to ACU. Now, did you find the Catholic ethos influence your education in any way? Because it's perhaps the only non-secular institution in the country. Every other uni is a secular college. This is a Catholic university. How did it differ from Sydney Business School in that way?
I can't really answer because when I was there, I was not teaching, so I didn't have any direct teaching experience.
What about as a student? Because you studied in both.
I didn't really study. I was working with a professor there, so I was having a relationship there with a professor, and I was slightly involved. It's hard to answer to this question because I wasn't so exposed. I was there for a brief time and I was having very limited interaction there.
Well, David, we've broken the first rule of podcasting. We've got 26 minutes into a podcast called Migrating to Australia, and we haven't talked about our guest's migration journey.
Well, what she does is so fascinating that migration sort of slipped our minds. You're a qualified engineer from Milan or from Torino, and you've come out here. Did you come out here on a student visa or a working holiday visa first? How did you first arrive?
So I came here in 2014 with the Australian Endeavour Award. That is an award sponsored by the Australian government for doing an exchange program towards my MBA that I was conducting in Italy. And so I was here for, I think at that time, 8 months. So paid by the government. The government paid for the flight. It paid for it was paying me a monthly stipend. And then while I was here, I applied for a PhD scholarship because I had the intention to move to Australia already. And so I was trying to find a way that would give me the easy option to come here. And so PhD seemed like a very good option. Spending time at university context, I realized that I was loving that context. I was loving learning. And so I applied for a PhD. And then I came here in 2015 with a PhD student visa. So it was a 5-year student visa.
Yes.
And
would have been a 574. Do you remember the subclass? 574 back then, I think.
I don't remember. But
were you obligated to return? Were you government Italian or Australian government sponsored or uni sponsored?
So the way it worked, I submitted the application to the Australian government, and I just gave the name of the CRICOS number. Yeah, that one. I gave evidence that I was enrolled in the program. So I provided all the paperwork, and then the Australian government issues that visa, and because it was a PhD program, they issued for five years visa. So it was a long visa.
You weren't obligated to return to Italy and perform good work in your discipline?
No, it doesn't. It's not required for the type of scholarship I've got. Some other scholarship, they are sponsored, because my scholarship was sponsored by the University of Sydney Business School, while some of my colleagues at university were sponsored by the government. So I had a Chilean colleague. She was sponsored to do her PhD with a scholarship from the Chilean government, and she was obliged to go back after her graduation for a minimum of 2 years, of 5 years, to basically bring back the knowledge. And
do you remember what visa did you apply for? An 885 or a 189 to get permanent residency?
I did the skill migration visa.
So how long ago did you get permanent residency?
I'm not prepared for this, but I can check.
Don't worry, I'm an Australian citizen. It doesn't matter. What are you a citizen for?
I've been a citizen since November 2019.
How hard were the questions on the test?
They were very easy.
And can you, Grant and I go to great lengths to let people know the test isn't to be feared. How long did the test actually take you? Only a couple of minutes?
I don't remember, but it was pretty quick. Like it's a multiple choice, if I will remember. And it's very easy.
And what about the interview? What did they ask you in the interview?
They didn't ask many questions, just brought the paperwork, and that was it. There was someone that was looking at my paperwork, and they might ask a couple of questions about my paperwork, but there was no real interview taken.
People listening, there's nothing to be scared about. The Australian citizenship test. The Australian citizenship test is easy. The exam is easy, and the interview is nothing to fear.
And to add on to that, when I got there, everyone was extremely friendly. Everyone was extremely happy. It was such a beautiful environment to be in. So I felt like everyone was just happy for people to get there and apply for their citizenship. It was a beautiful experience, actually.
So you don't have to know who has kicked the most goals in AFL, VFL history.
And no Donald Bradman rubbish about how many runs he scored as a batsman. And these things.
Oh, no. That question, I think, would be, what is Donald Bradman's test average?
What is it, 99.9 or something? Who knows?
99.94, which is why the ABC has their post box in each city as 9994. There we go. There's some trivia. You didn't put that on the test, government.
Corinna, tell me, how does it feel to be you're an Australian and you're an Italian? What are the differences? Are there any sort of, do you feel different as an Australian, or what do you like about being Australian?
I like the fact that this country gave me a lot. I felt this country has given me a lot of options that I never had in Italy. It's given me a lot of working experiences. So I arrived here and I was doing a PhD. I was teaching at university. I worked for a startup company. I did a theater direction. I actually started doing too much because there were so many opportunities here that I never had in Italy, that it was just amazing. You could never even grow if you don't do things. And in Italy, we have this perception, and in order to do things, you need to achieve a level of perfection. And that's the reason why, as young people, we don't grow there. There's no real growth. And then I came here and all these opportunities were presented to me, and I felt very grateful to this country. So that is the first thing. The other thing is that this country has a very rich multicultural context, which I think is quite rare around the world, having all these different cultures. You work in an office and there might be 15 different cultures working in the same office. And so that creates a richness of exchanges that are quite unique. So we were talking at the beginning of the podcast about Eastern worldview and Western worldview. And actually here we have great exposure with the Eastern worldview. So there's a lot of Chinese medicine, for example, here. There is a lot of Vedic knowledge that I write here in Australia as well. So all that richness is present. So I think, and then the third thing is the nature. The nature here is immensely beautiful, and the land gives you a real sense of warmth and protection. And I think that's because of the great work Aboriginal people have done in this land. You can still feel reverberating through the land when you go for a bushwalk, when you go on a coastal walk. So the land is in itself, it's very rich, it's very warm. And actually coming back here after 9 years living in Milan, I reconnected strongly with nature. I was able to slow down because of the presence of nature, and the whole experience of also being an island and being separated to an extent for the rest of the world, and especially from a very long distance from where is my original country, also gave me a great opportunity for growth, because I was here on my own. There was no one that I could rely on. So I had to learn to grow up and being able to be self-reliant. So this country has taught me in 8 years much more than what I've learned in all the previous years in Italy. So immensely grateful. Yes.
I'm surprised by one thing you said, and that was that in Italy you didn't have the opportunities that were presented to you here. Now, that might surprise people the same way it did with me. Italy is very much a first world country. It's a member of the EU. It's part of the open migration zone. I wonder what opportunities are available to you in Australia that aren't available to you in the EU.
It's just people here give you things to do. I got a producer that wanted to produce a theater direction, and I was the director. I got to teach at university, and in Italy it's not so easy to, when you do a doctorate, to be able to be teaching straight away at university. I got into a startup company and they told me, well, do some management of people, come out with a culture for the company. So people here are open, and they don't have rigidity of mind of, because you're an engineer, you can do people management things.
Do you think that's a throwback to our self-belief that we are an egalitarian country? Or I should say an egalitarian society, that everybody can have a go. As long as you can do the job, we let you do the job. We tend to think that everybody could be good enough if they have a go, if they give it a go, so that we're not saying that the only person in the three of us who could possibly lead, let's say, a cricket club or a football club would be you, because you're the highly qualified.
Surely that has a role into it, but then also the fact that you are, if we take the analogy of a small cage with a lot of mice in it, and then you take a big cage and a couple of mice in it, the 2 mice in a very big cage have a much better life than a lot of mice in a small cage. And so Australia is a country that is a big cage, and not many mice are there. And that creates a better environment where you can do things, because there is less competition. So that's, I think, is the other element of it.
What could we do better? You're an Australian citizen. You've been here for a long time. You've extolled the virtues of living here and being an Australian. What could we do better?
I think there is an urgent need to instill more culture into Australian society, and also to move away from a way of socializing that is based around getting drunk. So I think these 2 elements, and then teaching primary school, teaching in maternal school, teaching emotional intelligence, teaching empathy, because those kids are the people that are going to lead the world moving forward. And these are some elements that I find missing in the Australian culture. There is more need for emotional intelligence, and there's more need for people to feel free to socialize, feel free to express their feelings, their emotions without getting drunk. Because eventually people get drunk because they want to feel these emotions, but they haven't been allowed to, or they haven't been taught how to do. And here we come back to the beginning of the podcast. We need to teach people about the self. And so I think that's the biggest improvement for this country. And I think meditation is a powerful way of helping people to get in touch with the self. And also, the more we practice meditation, and in particular Vedic meditation, because it's a very natural, effortless technique that very quickly brings us to touch very deep place within ourselves. This technique can help us to develop greater empathy, because when we touch that deep space inside of us, we realize that we are all connected, we are all one. And because of that, there is no need to be fearful of other people. There is no other. We are all connected. We are all dependent on each other. And this virus has kind of showed us very, in a dramatic way, how all we are interconnected. And so if we meditate regularly, this interconnectedness is going to become evident. And now, as a meditator, I'm not going to just be able to look at you. I'm going to be able to feel within you. And if I'm able to feel within you, now we're going to have a better interaction. Now I'm going to be a happier person. And yes.
We hear a lot in media, social media, the word mindfulness. How is mindfulness different to meditation?
Mindfulness, fullness of mind. So I think everyone that wants to approach meditation, I don't think they're looking for fullness of mind. They're really looking for emptiness of mind. So mindfulness is helpful to create some calmness, some relaxation, but it's still fullness of mind. Vedic meditation is a transcending technique. And what that means, transcending, means to go beyond. And what we go beyond is we go beyond thinking when we practice Vedic meditation. And so going beyond thinking means experiencing emptiness of mind. But it's not like sleep. When you are experiencing in Vedic meditation emptiness of mind, you are fully awake. And that state is extremely restful, from 2 to 5 times more restful than sleep. And we know that whenever the body is resting deeply enough, it's going to start releasing stress. And what is that makes people suffer is stress that is accumulated in the body for a lifetime, because we didn't have a technique that helped us to release stress as we move in our life. And because with this technique, we touch this emptiness of mind, we rest deeply. Every day we come out of our regular practice twice a day, 20 minutes, more resourceful, happier, because now we found where happiness lies. Happiness is not out there. And this technique, it allows you to experience that. While mindfulness, it allows to experience some calmness, but it's still a fullness of mind.
Corinna, can you do effective Vedic meditation with music on?
Vedic meditation is practiced with your eyes closed, and you are given a sound, which is called in Vedic language Bija mantra. This sound has got no meaning and is chosen for you based on your body, mind type, and your life stage. And so music is not necessary, because this sound that is given to you, you will close your eyes and you will be given instruction on how to think this sound. Is going to very easily taking you to that field beyond thinking. Now, if you have music on, you can still meditate, because noise is no barrier to meditation. And that's also going to be taught in the course. But our preference is to meditate without music. But still, if you are on a train and there's someone close to you with some music on, you can still meditate, because noise is no barrier to meditation.
I have been doing it for a long time, I need to do it more often. Sometimes I sweat profusely. Sometimes I get rather cold. Why? What are those temperature variances signs of? The fatigue, the stress leaving the body? Sometimes I sweat really profusely. Sometimes I get very cold.
David, you got it right. So because our metabolic rate in Vedic meditation drops dramatically to help the body to rest deeply, two things might happen. The first one, metabolic rate dropped, and so we might feel cold. That's why we like to meditate with a blanket close to us. So if we get cold, we can cover ourselves. However, we said earlier that whenever the body is resting deeply enough, it will start releasing stress. And the process of releasing stress causes the body to become more active. And the body getting more active might generate some sense of heat. And that's why you're having these heat flashes when you meditate. You are releasing the accumulated stress.
Teenagers can learn. How old do you have to be to learn Vedic meditation? How old? What's the earliest you can start?
So the earliest you can start is the moment you're born. There is a baby mantra that can be given from the teacher to the baby when the baby is born. The earliest, the better. And then from 0 to 12 years old, we give what we call a word of wisdom to the child. And it's a technique that is practiced with the eyes open. So children under 12 years old don't practice any eyes closed technique because the technique is so powerful. If a child was to practice the technique, it would get so fascinated by what he's experiencing with the eyes closed, it would never want to come out. And so children practice, yes, because they are very easily get into the transcendence with the technique. So they can start practicing the eyes closed technique from 12 years old, and they're going to practice for a number of minutes that is equal to their age. And then once they're 18 years old, they move to 20 minutes twice a day, regular practice.
Teenagers are very self-conscious the world over. How do you get a teenager interested in something like Vedic meditation when they don't want their friends to see them eyes closed, sitting in a lotus position? How do you sell? How do you pitch? Do you get parents to talk to them? How do they want to learn? How do you make them want to learn?
So first of all, there's no need to sit in the lotus position. We can sitting comfortably on a chair. So no lotus position needed. Secondly, we don't teach Vedic meditation to a child unless one of the two parents is practicing also meditation, Vedic meditation or transcendental meditation. If one of the two parents is practicing Vedic or transcendental meditation, then we teach to the child or to the young person. They really need to be wanting to meditate from their side, but we can entice them. How do we entice them? We meditate regularly at home so they can see that it's something that we do on a regular basis. And then we can check whether there is any area in their life where they would like to see some improvements. And we might suggest that meditation might help them to get some improvements in those areas. Academic performance is one of these areas because Vedic meditation and transcendental meditation is demonstrated to improve academic performance. But there are a lot of other benefits that meditation can bring. Anxiety. Now a lot of children suffer from the syndrome where what's the deficit of attention? I don't remember technical.
ADHD.
So meditation is helpful in all these cases. But what we don't want is to create a resentment in the child about meditation. And that's why we never force. And we always try that the decision comes from them and that they really want to do it. Because we don't want to create an experience where they feel they are forced to learn and now they're developing resentment towards meditation, and we're going to prevent them to then practice when they are adults, and they're going to need the meditation even more than when they are younger, because when we get older, life becomes more complex. There are more things that we need to handle, more challenges, more changes of expectations. So we really need meditation. But of course, if the child is open and they want to learn, it's a beautiful thing for them to do. But we always want a parent to be meditating as well.
A lot of corporates, a lot of businesses are taking up meditation for their teams, for their staff. And why? How do we make it something that everybody gets into? What's an effective means to promote the benefits of it? Is it just word of mouth? We don't see advertising in the mainstream media for Vedic meditation. I've done it for 25 years and it's beautiful. I prefer it to sleep. It's better than sleep.
I agree with that. So the way we work is by word of mouth. Our technique is a very ancient technique, and attached to it, there is a whole wisdom that comes with it. And so in our tradition, we are not market driven. We're not going to change the way the technique is taught just to appeal to more people, just to reach more people, because that's the way the knowledge gets lost. That's the way people take a meditation course and then say, oh, it's not working. Of course, the technique has been diluted to make it more, to sell it more easily to people. So we are not market driven. And we also want for people to be willing to learn, to put the effort to learn. And so word of mouth is what is worked for our community as the best way to spread the knowledge. But of course, we want for more and more people to get exposed to this knowledge and to this technique. I'm open to suggestion on what's the best way to diffuse this knowledge, because it's urgent. And the problem is that there is so many options out there, and it's not easy for people to select what's true knowledge, what's really gonna work, and what's not. So open for suggestions here, David.
You'd be in a very powerful position to promote it because you have a foot in both camps, for want of a better term. You have stunning academic intellectual credentials and you're an engineer. A lot of people think of Vedic meditation and bearded men with braids in their hair and hippies, and you presented a corporate, a very solid intellectual backing to it. Is that why the corporates like it? Because you can sell it to them for one. I don't like the word sell. You can promote it to them. You're not braided and from Nimbin, and you're bringing something. Is it better for you to promote it because they're more comfortable with you being a PhD in business? How is it? Well, I for a matter of disclosure, I know Corinna well, and I know her partner Paolo. Now, Paolo is corporate as well, but he's very different. What's the perfect way to sell it? You're looking. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I just think that maybe you bridge the gap with your.
So every teaching is relevant to different people in different ways. So there will be teacher that will appeal more to people that are more like into hippie stuff. And there are going to be teachers that are more appealing maybe to mothers. So every teacher has got a different story. And that story is going to help the audience that is interested in meditation to relate to them for who they are. And so my specific story is a story of having an engineering degree, having a PhD. And so it makes easier for a corporation to relate with me because I speak their language. I studied what is the workplace, the management, the social interaction there. So I'm relevant to them. They can make sense of what I do better because of who I am. Does it make sense?
Absolutely, 100%.
I came up with 2 strategies depending on which market you're wanting to get to. First one, a special tax deduction for proprietary companies. The other one, for the younger market, just make it illegal.
And then we will have people manifesting in the street. We want...
Yeah, make it illegal, or at least make sure every parent is telling their teenager
not to do it.
Do not meditate.
One really fascinating difference in the process, and if you could take us through the reasons why, I'd love to know. When you meditate by yourself, it's lovely. When you meditate with 2, 3, 4 people, it's even better. Why is it better in a group setting?
So quantum physics have demonstrated the existence of the quantum field. So when we look at the body is made of cells, the cells are made of atoms, the atoms are made of protons, neutrons, electrons. And then if we look further into what's in there, we see there are quarks, and then there are leptoquarks.
And what? I was waiting for the quark.
Leptoquarks are undulation that comes in and out of existence. And where do they go to when they go out of existence? They go into what science has called the unified field. Now, let's think about the unified field as like a net. When we practice Vedic meditation, the sound that you're given and the way you're taught how to use it is going to bring your mind to subtlest and subtlest layer of thinking, and then you go beyond thinking, you transcend, and you touch a place where there is no mantra, no thoughts. That place that you touch in meditation is the same place where the leptoquark disappear into. So it's like this net. So you can all visualize this net. Now, when you are meditating on your own, it's like having one ball sitting on the net. This net is curving, but just a little bit. Now, if you have 5, 6, 10 balls, the net is going to curve much more. And not only that, the bigger ball in the group, the person that is having the deepest experience is going to curve the net more for everyone, and everyone is going to be dragged in. And that's why when we meditate in a group, we have deeper experience than when we meditate on our own. And not only that, the curvature of the net has also an influence in the environment around us. And that was scientifically demonstrated. It's been named the Maharishi effect. And the experiment was conducted in Washington, D.C. A number of meditators were brought there to meditate. It was, I think the number is equivalent, the 1% equivalent of the total population. So they brought in 1% equivalent of Washington, D.C. population. And then they were collaborating with the police department. And they measure a drop in criminal rate, statistically significant. A drop in domestic violence, statistically significant. So the curvature of the net is having an influence also on the environment around us. And so let's say now you are a parent and you're meditating. Now, all of a sudden, also your children are going to feel that quietness and they're going to calm down. And so it's important that we meditate. It's a social responsibility because we are meditating. If we get at least 1% of the entire globe to meditate, we're going to create a shift into the entire consciousness of the world. And now imagine we are all here. A lot of people are suffering from fear because of COVID. And they can be fear to get sick, fear of not being able to see your loved ones because you cannot travel, fear of economic consequences of COVID. So there is a lot of fear. Now imagine in this world that is filled with fear, we get 1% of the entire population in the world to meditate. All of a sudden, this fear is going to dissipate. And what we can do when we are not in fear is much greater than what we can do when we are in fear. So it's a social responsibility to start meditate.
And explain to us how you don't need to be in the same room to meditate together. If we, after the podcast, decided to meditate, the same effect manifests itself via telephony, via Skype. There's no difference, is there?
No. I conduct my group meditation mostly via Zoom these days because of the COVID pandemic. And the quality of the unified field is that it's non-locatable, is beyond space and time. And because it's non-locatable, it's not dependent on space and time. And so if we have a phone call and we all close our eyes, we're going to all touch into that unified field that is beyond space and time. And so my students report they are having deep experiences also when we meditate through the Zoom meeting.
Grant, my old man, 75, he had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma many years ago, and he swears that chemo and meditation were instrumental in his recovery. Are there any scientific studies to talk about the benefit of meditation for serious illness?
I'm not aware of any, but there might be. I'm not aware right now of any, but any illness that stress make worse, meditation is going to make it better because meditation is going to take the stress out of your system. So any disease that stress get worse, meditation is going to make it better. And eventually, most medical associations agree that, I'm not sure about the exact number, but between 70 and 80% of all disease come from stress.
What a podcast. I don't have anything more to say. And I won't, because you've been fantastic, Corinna. Grant?
I just thought that surgical intervention was pretty good for me.
Surgical intervention was...
I wouldn't have liked to try and manage my tumour away, but I would say if you don't have a life that gives you stress, you don't have to deal with it.
You still meditate, though?
Yeah. Or I think I was thinking about the 1% thing, Corinna. I wondered whether if you added the Buddhist and the Shinto and the Hindu traditions together, we probably have more than 1% of the world population meditating already. I think we just need to concentrate on these capitalist populations that have a very different grounding in what a successful life is compared to some of the other traditions.
Not all the meditation techniques are transcending techniques, and that lies the difference. And that's why we are not getting to that 1%, because even Buddhists now are start introducing transcendental meditation into their community because they don't have a transcending technique. And so what we need is to introduce a transcending technique, that technique that help us to touch that unified field. And I'm pretty sure that we don't reach 1% of the entire world population of people fully meditating. In India, not many people are left that are meditating. Many Indian people have lost connection with their tradition, actually.
Because they're all chasing capitalist success.
Yes. But you see, Grant, it's going to be very hard to change capitalist society from the same level of consciousness that has created. And that's why we need people meditating to shift the state of consciousness and create a different reality. We were talking before, we perceive reality according to our state of consciousness. And so we really need a different state of consciousness to create a different society.
I think
you go.
I was just going to say, I think Mother Earth is rapidly heading towards giving us all a bit of a reality check, and who knows where that'll lead us to.
If people listening to the podcast here overseas want to get in touch to meditate with you or get further information on how you can help them, what are the best ways? We'll put it in the program notes, but what are the best ways for those listening now to get in touch with you? Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp?
You can contact me on Instagram, Corinna Galliano, or on Facebook, or on my website.
What's your website address?
Is corinnagalliano.com.
Gee, you got in early on that one, David.
Fantastic.
David, where can people reach out to you if they want to meditate with you, David?
I'm very happy to meditate with who wants my migration assistance. What is the best direct message or Twitter? That's the best way, the fastest way. Or debanda.com.au, David Bongiorno and Associates, dbanda.com.au. Corinna, you've been fantastic.
And you too. Lots of great questions.
Oh, we were thrilled. You've got so many talents and skills to bring to the table of Australia. Well done. And a great plug on Vedic meditation, because, Grant, I've been doing it for a long time and it certainly has helped me. I need to do it more regularly. Maybe we could do sessions together, Grant, before the podcast. What do you think? That
would definitely create more coherence between the two of you, and is going to get even better knowledge out of the people that you are interviewing.
There you go. You've heard it from an expert, from a qualified teacher. What do you think?
Sorry, the trance.
She really are an interview. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Bongiorno, and I'm going off into my quiet place.
It's fantastic, isn't it? I lose time, sense of space, place, and 20 minutes flies. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
I'm still a cynic, and After I've said goodbye to our audience, David, and I might add that you can chase up David on Instagram, and I just love saying this because it's such a complicated one.
It's awful. It's awful.
David _A_C_ Bongiorno.
David Bongiorno was taken when I came late to Instagram, early to Twitter.
I hope the David Bongiorno, who we've been referring to people to for a couple of years, isn't also a migration lawyer.
No, I think he's an engineer. I think so. It would offend his sense of order and propriety because I don't know what he's been. I get more out of Twitter from the podcast than Instagram because of the wrong answer.
There's probably so many of those people, David, that we've sent to him, not only wanted to have some migration issues worked out, but they were wanting to build a bridge. Maybe it's been marvelous for him.
There's a few David Bongiornos in Australia, and one of them's an engineer, one of them's in cheese, and I'm very envious, and the other one is an artist. I'm definitely not the artist. I might be a different type of artist.
Mate,
migration.
I'm just thinking about the guy who's in cheese. I hope he gets out soon.
I can't remember the food company, but I'll tell you what, wouldn't be bad to be in cheese. Have you ever tried the Sardinian cheese? I don't think that they export it anymore. I don't think they're allowed, but it's a live cheese with cheese worms in it. It's quite extraordinary.
Oh, no, I don't like that one. I've seen that on offer, but I'll pass on that one. Hey, I'm about to say goodbye to all the Migrating to Australia podcast listeners. Thanks again. And look, just go out there and meditate. That's all I can say.
Ciao, guys. Bye.